Hi, my name is Andrew Katinsky. Today I'll be telling you about how NC State developed a digital forensics investigation service and explain our journey. I am the Director of Information Security Services, managing the security operations staff for the university. So, what is digital forensics? Just so we're all on the same page, I'll read the official definition. That it's an application of computer science and investigative procedures for a legal purpose involving the analysis of digital evidence after proper search authority, chain of custody, validation with mathematics, use of validation tools, repeatability, reporting, ad nauseum. Basically, we take an image of a machine, we run that through an investigative tool, we look for indicators of compromise, digital evidence, retrieve data that was left on the machine, artifacts, etc. So, a little background about us. Obviously, we're located in North Carolina, in the Research Triangle Park area. As you can see, we're a fairly large school, with 34,000 students, roughly. And you can see that the security staff is just flat out outnumbered, even considering that, our focus is primarily on university-owned devices and systems. There's still that falls into a lot of areas when you consider all the faculty and staff and lab machines and whatnot on the campus. So, why did we go down this journey? Well, surprise, limited staff and resources. We're a small team. We don't have a lot of automation. Our budget is small, and we don't have all the latest tools and technologies. Since they don't get used very often, it is difficult for us to justify the expense of, buying this forensic software over other competing priorities. But doing forensics, it takes time. It's time consuming. With a small staff, that means I tie up, one of my 6 staff to run an investigation, and depending on the complexity, that could be for a little while. Since we don't do it very often, there really hasn't been a priority to get somebody trained. Quite frankly, you train somebody and you do this once every 2 months, you get a little bit of rusty without practice. And our processes were just flat out immature. We basically took everything that came in and tried to take care of it. If it was time sensitive and it took us a little while, the customers just felt like we weren't giving them the attention they needed for the investigation. The reality, we were probably trying to find the on button and get the software spun up just so we could remember how to do this again. So, real quick look, this is kind of what it looked like when we started. Pretty straightforward flowchart that basically said that if it came in, we ended up investigating it. The priority really didn't matter much of where it came from because we kind of felt obliged to meet the needs of the campus and take care of all these investigations as they came in, right, wrong, or indifferent. So we decided to do a little bit of research. This was actually part of a practicum paper that I was also putting together. We were looking for a project that needed to be done and taken care of, and we were redeveloping our service platform. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to put it through the paces. So we started with a survey. We did a bit of research. We sent out 2 surveys. One went to the UNC System Information Security Council. The council is made up of the security leaders from the 17 UNC schools, as well as the system office representative. Mardisha Bell, who is our Chief Information Security Officer, sits on this board, and she had asked them for assistance in filling out the survey that we assembled. In addition to the schools filling it out, we also had the system office participate in what their experiences were from a forensic service perspective. My team and I also sent the same survey to the Ren Isaac list server. That list was primarily addressing the practitioners, the people who are feet on the ground doing the work on a regular basis. I did get a lot of emails back asking me questions if my survey was legit, but I only ended up with about 18 institutions responding out of the 620 that are indicated to be in the REN-ISAC system. So, but it still gave us a pretty good representation of the populations, local and kind of across the university system across the country. So we can kind of compare ourselves to what people were doing out there. So what did we ask? It was a short survey. It was 10 questions, the typical how, why, how often, who. We wanted to know how you were doing your forensics investigations. Were you handling them in-house? Were you outsourcing them? What reasons were you using for forensics investigations? Why did you do them? How often were you doing forensics investigations? We wanted to kind of gauge, maybe we were doing it way more often than we should, or maybe we weren't doing them enough and other people saw more reasons to do these investigations. And then at the end, we ask for people's contact information and some free-form question text for us to be able to get back in case we had additional questions, and giving them the opportunity to ask us more questions about our survey. So, what did we find? Surprise, we aren't unique. We got our responses back and we kind of went through the data, and we found out that the need for forensics was actually pretty low. Only about a third of the institutions that surveyed reported that they actually performed investigations more often than once a month. Of the 27 total responses we had, all but 3 had some level of in-house digital forensic service. Those 3 institutions indicated that they had entirely outsourced their digital forensics work. The ones that had responded, 12 had indicated that their digital forensics was entirely in-house, and the other 12 said that they had a hybrid strategy where they were doing some semblance of in-house and some semblance of outsourced forensics. Turns out for 9 of the institutions, 33% of them, the most common answer was that they outsourced complex cases. And 5 of those 9 indicated that they lack talent or resources was a contributing factor as to why. 2 institutions reported that they purely outsourced due to the lack of in-house expertise or the time and resources needed to perform the service in-house. The response overwhelmingly indicated that the biggest roadblock was the available talent and lack of time and resources to run the service effectively. 60% of the schools reported that 60% was using actually an FTE or less, 1 man-hour less per year, and 52% of the total population actually said that they spent less than half an FTE on digital forensics investigations. If you want a little bit more information, there should be the practicum paper that I've written. It will be in the materials associated with this particular presentation. Feel free to read it and comment and ask me more questions if you'd like more details. So, why were digital forensics used? We wanted to know why. Of all the resources, institutions that we had asked, it basically came down to 4 different categories: data breach, human resources, indicators of compromise, and e-discovery litigation hold, legal matters. Data breaches were, it's pretty straightforward. They're looking like we do for sensitive data on a machine. If there was a data breach, my team would typically go and look for the machine, not necessarily for the indicator compromise, but more importantly, was there sensitive data or reportable data due to a compliance need on that particular machine and identified on that system. Human resources. We get a lot of these, and it was actually the second most type of reason for digital forensics from the survey results. Requesters are looking for evidence that there was some sort of misconduct on an employee's part and want evidence to justify a reprimand or some sort of dismissal. The biggest issue with this type of investigation is it's typically speculative, so the direction of the investigation isn't usually very clear or defined A lot of times we'll get a request saying, hey, I think this employee was doing something wrong because somebody said something, and can you help me figure out what that was? The indicators of compromise, and this is really kind of the real root of incident response. We don't personally spend a whole lot of time on this. We tend to wipe and move on, but there is a good number of institutions that use digital forensics to see if a system is compromised and how it was compromised. In many cases, this might be part of an after-action report, root cause analysis, or once the crisis has kind of settled down, to see what might have happened. Finally, the last and currently the least used category was the retrieval of data as it relates to a litigation hold or e-discovery request. This category kind of also includes retrievals for law enforcement, since it would typically require a subpoena and be vetted by the Office of General Counsel or Legal Affairs. So what were the options? Basically, the data received from the peer institutions via the survey helped our team determine the best options for moving forward. Results from the survey showed that North Carolina State University wasn't alone, as they also lack experienced staff and the digital forensics skill set. This seemed mostly due to the difficulty of competing with private sector's competitive salaries. People who do digital forensics are well paid, and they're typically very pinpointed focuses, and universities don't typically have the need to hire a particular single purpose user. We're more of multitaskers, jack of all trades type individuals. So essentially there were three types of options for running this type of service. The last one on the list technically is an option, but it's more of a fallback and maybe a place to look while you're doing some of your research. So the first one's in-house, right? Only 6 of the surveyed institutions had dedicated staff to digital forensics. It's just what it sounds like. Schools that, are doing their, they have dedicated staff, they're certified, trained, and they typically have enough work to keep them from getting rusty. It's definitely a way to go. Not sure that was the way we were going to go. But when we broke down the numbers in our particular case, looking at our staff time per incident costs and dedicated hardware, write block software, we estimated it was about $12,000 a year for an average of 6 investigations to year, and that really doesn't count some of the spin-up time that we might consider as part of this service. The outsourced solution, it tends to be a little more expensive individually, especially if you're, depending on the people you're outsourcing your data to. However, as time passes, it doesn't require really maintaining trained staff or operations, and other than monitoring the activities between your institution and the third-party partner that's actually doing the work. So you do tend to save on the upkeep of hardware and software licensing and some of those man hours. In our case, we spoke to a local investigation firm, and they quoted us a rate of $250 an hour, $250 an hour. And we worked out the cost using the same, 6 investigations. It really comes to about $9,000 a year. And, the advantage is you have somebody to pick up the phone and call. Being local, they can kind of come on site, pick up what we need, take it with them, or do it in person. And their folks are certified, and they'll stand up in court and help argue their results, for lawyers or human resources. The hybrid solution is kind of the best option because it's a combination of both of these. The challenge would be to identify when outsourcing makes more sense versus conducting it in-house. Additionally, one could develop cost models to help defer the costs and expenses in a chargeback model. And this is kind of what we were looking at. This could also help serve as a deterrent for cases that are typically time wasters, like a human resource investigation with very little defined scope. Knowing that there might be a cost for investigating for the time and being billed, being referred to an outside entity, it might make the requester kind of think twice about moving forward with the case until they have a better idea of what they're really looking for. Exploring the cyber insurance option. And so our school has cyber insurance, as a lot of other schools also do, and cyber insurance will typically cover forensics in the event of an incident. So if you want to choose to consider every little investigation as an incident, I can guarantee your premiums will probably go up. But it is a good fallback option in the event of like an all hands on deck mass incident at scale. Most organizations without a considerable security team of experts is going to need help. And, this might mean hiring somebody from the outside to come in and take care of that. However, I will say if you do use cyber insurance and they provide a list of experts, there's a good chance that, you need to make sure that these contractors are on your contract so that you can source to them without wasting a whole lot of time. In the event of a mass breach like PCI, for instance, you're going to have somebody come in anyway. So you pretty much better be prepared to kind of handle that use case one way or the other. So our final decision, what did we end up doing? So we decided to go with a hybrid model, and we're still kind of setting it up and getting our bearings and understanding how this is all going to work in the end. So from our perspective, we're located in a very tech-rich area. So getting access to some reasonably priced, folks to contract out to do our forensics was reasonable. So geography tend to be a bonus for us. Someone local helps maintain the chain of custody and make it reasonable. We don't need to ship off hard drives and computers out of state. And we have we do keep a very, relatively small investment in the tools to perform the investigations that are a little more sensitive, that we don't want to send off. Since NC State was building out our service catalog, we actually had an opportunity to make this a billable service. Depending on the direction the investigation goes, it would help determine the costs to the customers. It should help keep the number of trivial investigations down, since there would be a cost. And, the result would be, third-party verification of any misconduct and misuse. So there's kind of a bonus there. Also gave us the opportunity to rewrite our playbook. So this is kind of what it looks like now. We take into consideration the time and effort involved, and we shift the costs over to the requesters. The service plan kind of gives us the ability to lay out an SLA for each incident or investigation, and the costs for the services up front. Based on the service requested, the team would have the appropriate options available to the customer. The decision tree here for the digital investigation service was, changed to include the opportunity to be distributed when possible. So what lessons did we learn along this way? There's always going to be an exception. Nothing fits into a nice, pretty box. No surprise there. While it's not new, you always also have to expect the unexpected. We actually recently had a case where we had to acquire an image for law enforcement from an employee's workstation after hours. We suddenly found out when we went to go clean up our traces that we had no access to the building. So we're constantly tuning, access rights and access rights to the buildings and everything else that kind of goes along with it. And lastly, keep learning. See what works, see what doesn't. The playbook is meant to be a living document. Keep updating it with what works, what doesn't. It's especially important, like in our case, where you only need to go back to it a couple times a year. So I appreciate your time. I also want to give a special thank you to Dr. Charles Lesko from ECU and Dr. Paige Vernell from ECU, as well as Mardisha Bell, my boss, who kind of worked on putting this project together, as well as the research and getting my paper put together and assembled for you guys. So I want to thank you for your time. This is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. The slides should be in that folder, as well as the research information that's associated with this project. Again, please feel free to reach out anytime. I'm pretty quick responding to emails and willing to help you with whatever experience I can give you as far as what we've encountered and what may help you along your journey in this case. So I want to thank everybody for your time. You guys have a great day, and I hope to see you in person next year. Thank you very much.